Welcome, everybody. It's November 21st. We're here for our presentation from Mike Livingston, one of our members of the Aleut family from Cold Bay. He's in Anchorage now, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know him over the last month or so after seeing him actively sharing his wisdom on various Aleut Facebook pages or Unangax Facebook pages. Wealth of knowledge, really fun to talk with and get to know, and a life of service to our peoples, which is really, really great to see, and a legacy I hope to emulate as I grow older, as some of my family members did as well. So I'm here representing the Pacific Northwest Aleut Council. The other board members couldn't join us today, but we are so excited to be here and offer this to people to see in playback or hear in person with us today. And over the next 45 minutes or so, we should all be learning a bit more about our missing and murdered Indigenous peoples and women. And it's a really difficult topic, so just make sure you're taking care of yourself, finding services nearby if you need them. If you can't find what you're looking for, please always reach out to me or the other board members, or I'm sure even Mike knows a bit more about the Anchorage area and connections with the APIA, which is where he works after a long career elsewhere as well. Very interesting stories to tell. So yes, we hope you're all taking care of yourselves and supporting yourselves with what you need throughout this. And we'll have some questions and answers that won't be on this recording. We'll stop the recording just beforehand, but we're always just a click away or a phone call away. So thank you, Mike, again for being here. So grateful that you reached out and let us know that this was an option and opportunity to share.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stevie, for the warm introduction. Before I switch over to the PowerPoint, just real quick to explain what you're seeing. Of course, we have the United States flag here that was actually designed by a high school student named Robert G. Heft, who was born in Michigan and was age 17 when he won that design. And over here, the handsome Alaska flag designed by Benny Benson. And I'll have a little news information about Benny Benson towards the end of my presentation. And then to explain, I am a cultural heritage specialist with Aleutian Pribilof Islands Association, but I'm also a captain with the Alaska State Defense Force, and that's the uniform that I'm proudly wearing today. So let me switch over to the PowerPoint. And are you able to see it, Stevie? Okay, thank you. So the title of my presentation is a preliminary report on Unangax MMIP from 1959 to 2021 and Unangax MMI-W map 1741 to 2020. And the subtitle is One is Too Many. And again, my name is Michael Livingston. The co-author on this presentation is Marty Murray. There is a pre-survey that I'd encourage you to take. It is voluntary and it is confidential, but there's a link in the chat window. There's only 4 questions, and it's not really a test that's graded. It's just an indication for me so I can see where you are at the beginning of this presentation. So pre-survey number 1, please rate your current knowledge of Unangax MMIP, none, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. True or false, Unangax Aleut homicide rates are so low that it is really not a problem. Number 3, true or false, it is a good idea to be aware of the history and crime where you live. And 4, true or false, the Unangax Aleut homicide rates are lower than other natives. Just a little bit of an introduction. I was raised in Cold Bay on the Alaska Peninsula. I attended Kodiak High School and Bristol Bay High School. I'm a boarding home survivor. I graduated from the University of Alaska, as well as other universities. I have a Master's of Art in Anthropology, Alaska Native Archaeology, and a Master of Science in Psychology, as well as a PhD in Education. I've been a victim of attempted homicide on at least 3 occasions. I've had loved ones who have been victims of homicides. I've attended 3 funerals of Anchorage police officers and 2 funerals of Alaska State Troopers. I'm a principal investigator with the National Science Foundation and affiliate faculty at the University of Alaska and Alaska Pacific University, and a captain with the Alaska State Defense Force, which is a direct descendant of the Alaska Territorial Guard from World War II. More than likely, you have ancestors who served with the Alaska Territorial Guard during World War II, and chances are that those soldiers have not yet been honorably discharged. I began working as a police officer in 1978 and have served as a homicide detective, a cold case detective, as well as assisted in the investigation of serial killers. I'm a cultural heritage specialist with Aleutian Pribilof Islands Association, as well as a tribal member with the Aleut Corporation and the QTT tribe of Sandpoint. The co-author of this presentation is Marty Murray, who was raised in a United States Marshal home in Unalaska. Marty worked and lived in Unalaska for many years, and then moved to Kodiak and worked for the state of Alaska. Marty has over 40 years of extensive research with Alaska family trees, and is the owner and founder of Aleut database with over 600,000 names in her database. Because of her outstanding work, Marty has been adopted by the Kaulungan tribe of Unalaska. MMIP, MMIW is a very emotional topic. It involves real human beings, people we quite often know and care for and are often related to. It is a difficult topic, and encourage counseling, because counseling is a sign of strength. Over the years, as a police officer, I've gone to counseling and continue to go to counseling today. Counseling is like a triple braided cord that can help us get strong and get back into the battle. I've also listed SAMHSA's helpline number, as well as the Veterans Crisis Line number, and I'll at the end of this presentation, I'll put that up again. There's also a link to mentalhealth.gov, and again, counseling can help us heal. Our general abstract in this presentation is that some people believe that MMIP, MMIP-W is not a problem in the Aleutian and Pribilof Island region. And in fact, some reports and research actually support that it is not a problem. But we assert that previous reports and research has limitations. We also assert that people stuff down these tragic events, and they therefore do not become part of our institutional knowledge. Therefore, it's easy to believe that Unangax MMIP, MMIW is not a problem. And our research indicates that Unangax people may have endured more homicides over the past 300 years than other people. Towards the end of this presentation, I'll present several potential models for future success. A quick review of definitions and acronyms. AG is Attorney General, as in the United States Attorney General. Aleut can be Unangax, but it can also be Sugpiaq, Alutiiq, Naitsi, Dena'ina, Chugach, iqyax, Yupik, Athabaskan, and Inupiat are people from several other ethnic cultural backgrounds who identify themselves as Aleut. Speaking of Dena'ina, I'm presenting today from Anchorage, the lands of the Dena'ina people. AST stands for Alaska State Troopers, FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigations. Missing person is someone reported to law enforcement as missing. MMIW is missing and murdered Indigenous women. MMIP is missing and murdered Indigenous persons. So MMIP includes both female and males. Murdered, that is a legal term coming from Alaska Statutes Title 11, which includes victims of homicide, including criminally negligent homicide, manslaughter, vehicular homicide, murder 1, murder 2, or murder of an unborn child. Indigenous is a person native to a specific region whose ancestors lived in the region before colonists arrived. A person is a human being. Unangax is a descendant of the original inhabitants of the Aleutian Islands, the Pribilof Islands, the Shumagon Islands, and the west end of the Alaska Peninsula, almost to Port Hayden. And again, USAG is the United States Attorney General. Where these definitions become important is when Marty Murray and I focused our research on Unangax MMIP, we held very high standards. So utilizing Marty's amazing family tree, we were able to confirm that everybody that we identified has ancestors from the Unangax region. And then in addition, we confirmed that everyone identified as a homicide victim, there was actually homicide charges filed. In other words, it couldn't be just someone that someone thought was a homicide victim. And again, we held our standards very high. In a real sense, I began investigating Alaska Native homicides as a young teenager. I was age 16, living in my beautiful hometown of Cold Bay, when tragically in a nearby village, a young student was killed. And it was upsetting for the whole region, and in a real sense haunted me for decades. I wondered who could do such a thing. Was the suspect identified? Was the suspect arrested? Was the suspect convicted? Did the defendant spend time in jail? And then I also wondered, was the young student honored? Was the grave marked? And again, I asked, at age 16, who could do such a thing? Just a quick reminder, when we talk about the Aleutian and Pribilof Islands, they're located off of the southwest coast of Alaska, running between the Alaska Peninsula over towards the Kamchatka Peninsula of Russia. And our region also includes the Shumagan Islands, south of the end of the Alaska Peninsula, as well as the Alaska Peninsula, almost all the way to Port Hayden. We have 13 villages in our region, including St. Paul, St. George, Nelson Lagoon, King Cove, Unalaska, False Pass, Sand Point, Nikolsky, Belkovsky, Atka, Pauliff Harbor, and Unga. And then quickly talking about the United States Attorney General, around 2019, the US Attorney General was William Barr, and he took the time, perhaps the first United States Attorney General, to visit Alaska and go out to rural Alaska to see firsthand some of the challenges that people in rural Alaska are facing. And after that visit, he gave the US Attorney General's MMIP initiative, which gave 3 directives to establish a regional coordinator. And that coordinator is Ingrid Cumberledge, an amazing person from the Shumagan Islands. And she's been doing a really good job. And the acting Attorney General for Alaska, Brian Wilson, has noted that Ingrid gets things done. And so we're very grateful to have Ingrid as the coordinator. And then number 2, specialized FBI rapid deployment teams. And these teams, if local or state departments request that they respond, they will respond to assist. And then comprehensive data analysis. And this is where we felt people like Marty Murray and myself and others felt that we could help the most. And that's to analyze federally supported databases and data collection practices to identify opportunities to improve missing and murdered American Indian and Alaska Native data. So to Marty Murray, people like Marty Murray and myself, when we saw this initiative, we wondered how in the world can the federal government know the data that we've been collecting for decades, and we concluded really they couldn't. And so we stepped forward and offered the data that we'd begin collecting to assist in directive number 3, the comprehensive data analysis. I want to go over some wise words from elders such as Amphisia Shapsnikoff. And as you may know, Amphisia was born out in the Western Aleutian Islands, I believe Atka, and then she was raised in Unalaska. And Amphisia is one of the few Unanga people that I know of that has been honored by the Alaska legislature for her dedication for keeping Unanga traditions such as basket weaving alive. And this is a quote from a book called Moments Rightly Placed by Ray Hudson, page 139. I see my granddad's name there, but he was not from Amchitka. Dang archaeologist, lies and lies. Never say anything true about the Aleuts. And then another quote from Amphisia. This is from Unugulu Tunusangan, Old Time Stories, again by Ray Hudson, page 215. And you can see the cover of another book, the book I mentioned previously, Moments Rightly Placed. In the cover of the book, you can see Unalaska Island. You can see a silhouette picture of Amphisia as well as one of her beautiful baskets. Things I heard of long ago are happening. Unknown people are coming, taking over our land and the things we make our living with. So let's get together and prevent these by speaking up. And Amphesia spoke, she acted the words that she spoke. Before the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, she joined with 2 other Unangax people from Unalaska and filed a lawsuit to stop the sale of lands in Unalaska so that title could be considered instead under the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. And then other words of wisdom come from down south from Linda T. Smith, her book, Decolonizing Methodologies. And Linda Smith was here in Anchorage a couple of years back giving a presentation at the Anchorage Museum. And this quote is from her book, page 1. Research is probably one of the dirtiest words in the Indigenous world's vocabulary. When mentioned in many Indigenous contexts, it stirs up silence. It conjures up bad memories. It raises a smile that is knowing and distrustful. So to jump now to some of the information that has been published about Unangax Aleut homicides, this is a screen capture from a news story from the Alaska news source published July 20th, 2020. And it's from a Remember Our Sisters map from the Alaska Federation of Natives. And if you look out in our region, it looks like there might be one tack in our region, but actually that tack is closer to Chignik. And so if you look at this map and you think that that there's no MMIP in the Aleutian or Pribilof Islands, you might think that it's not a problem. And then another research publication from the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium Injury Atlas, an update 2014, page 47. They looked at Aleut homicides from 1992 to 2011. And they said that there was 5 Aleut homicides. And therefore the intentional injury rate is significantly lower than Alaska Native statewide. In fact, they said that rates are so low that per capita cannot be determined. And therefore you might come to the conclusion that the Aleut homicide rate is the lowest of all Alaska Natives. But this research did some things that we found curious. For example, they did not include Aleut homicides occurring outside of the Aleut region. And as we know, the Unangax people have been forcibly relocated since the 1700s. And in addition, they did one more really interesting thing. They reclassified Aleut homicide victims based upon the location in which they were declared deceased. So if you pull up a map of the Aleutians East Borough, you know that a small portion of it goes up towards Port Hayden, and then there's a break. There's a point, there's a thin line there where it's no longer Unangax territory, it's now Alutiiq or Sugpiaq territory. So if I was mortally injured on the left side of that line, and then I stepped over and was declared deceased on the right side of that line, under the ANTHC report, I'm no longer Unangax, I'm now Sugpiaq. Or another example, if I was working as an Unalaska police officer, was mortally wounded in Unalaska, even though they knew I was mortally wounded, they called for medevac to me. I was transported to the wonderful, amazing Alaska Native Medical Center, but the doctors and nurses couldn't do anything to revive me, and I was declared deceased at the ANMC. Under this report, I'm no longer Unangax. I am now Dena'ina. And so when I asked the authors of this report, how many, so you reclassified Aleut homicide victims from Unangax to Dena'ina or whatever, how many did you reclassify? They said, we're unable to determine. And I had question after question to them, and their response again and again was unable to determine. Another concern is that the ANTHC Injury Atlas only covered a 20-year time period, whereas Unangax history extends back 10,000 years, and a European contact has lasted for 280 years. So working with people like Ingrid Cumberledge, we focused our preliminary report to the time period when Alaska became a state in 1959. And that is a 62-year time period from 1959 to 2021. During that time period, we found 9 missing Indigenous persons and 28 homicides in the region. 24 of the 28 were Unangax, so 85.7% of the homicide victims in the region during that time period were Unangax. There were 37 additional Unangax homicides outside of the region, with over half of those, 54% of those, being in Anchorage. During that time period, we found a total of 61 Unangax homicides in 62 years, almost one per year. Since we published this preliminary report, we have found more, and tragically there has been more, and so the rate looks to be over one per year. In the region, homicide victims are 28.6% female and 71.4% male. The average age of homicide victims, Unangax homicide victims in our region, is 27, ranging from age 1 to 57, and includes a boy age 7 and a girl age 9. We uploaded our data into a bar chart over the decades with the light green, the top row, summary, the middle medium green being outside the region, and the bottom dark green being inside the region. So a total of 7 in the 1960s, 7 in the 1970s, 1980s, 10, a significant increase in the 1990s with a total of 16, in the 2000s, 12, and the 2010s, 9. In terms of missing Unangax and Indigenous people in the Unangax region from 1959 to 2021, we located 9, mostly from NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Person Systems federal database, with the average age of 27.4, 88.9% male, 11.1% female. The age range was 15 to 53, mostly fishing boat mishaps. They don't call it the deadliest catch for nothing. Being a fisherman on the Bering Sea is a deadly occupation. In addition, we located reports of one 15-year-old girl falling off a dock in our region. And then a quote from Dr. Doug Veltri, an awesome archaeologist who's worked in our region since the 1970s. And this quote is from Perspectives on Aleut Culture Change in the Russian Period, published in 1990. And what Doug said is, of all Alaska Native people, Aleuts have the distinction of experiencing the longest and harshest history of contact with non-natives, beginning with the Russian Promoshleniki, or fur hunters. And then backing up a little bit in time to Russian Orthodox priest Ivan Veniaminov, who lived in Alaska from 1824 to 1834, there is no reason to conceal cruel acts against the Aleuts. When he lived in Alaska, Veniaminov found evidence of many cruel acts against the Aleuts. And he also said there's no reason to exaggerate cruel acts against the Aleut. He documented that Europeans tend to minimize the number of Aleut homicide victims. Europeans also file false police reports, Europeans also file false reports, and Europeans shift their unsavory characteristics to Unangan or Aleut people. Veniaminov also noted that there was differences before colonizations and after colonizations in terms of honoring victims. Before colonizations, homicide victims were lifted up, songs were written about them, body ornaments was created to honor homicide victims, as well as full-size wooden statues were carved and covered with garments to remember those victims, so that they would be remembered for generations and not forgotten. Whereas after colonization, the goal of early Europeans was extermination. And that word extermination is not my word, that's Veniaminov's word. And that's on page 234 of Notes on the Island of the Unalaska District. And if you haven't read that book and studied it, I encourage you to do so. One single word from an Aleut person could result in harsh reactions, not only to that person, but to the entire family, the entire village, the entire island, and the entire island group. And then a quote from page 175 to 178. Aleuts can spend a whole day or days without speaking a word, always appearing weighed down by some sorrow or serious thought. And it's understandable in the context of seeing entire island groups depopulated, that people would be more silent and be more careful about what they said.